Hey everyone, welcome back. It's Veronica. In today's video, we're going to be planning out my bullet journal for the month of August. So I started off with my cover page as usual, and I just drew August out with a pencil so I could kind of know how I wanted it to look, and then I went over it with my gel pen. And then I also thickened it up a little bit more so that it looked a little bit more like calligraphy. Then, again, I took my pencil and I drew out 2017 below it. So this whole setup is going to be a little bit more artsy than usual. I got some new watercolor pens that I kind of wanted to try out, and so you'll see I use these a lot throughout this whole spread. If you're wondering about the gel pens I use and about the watercolor pens I use, I'll have all of the supplies that I use linked down in the description below.
I've got a feeling I'm falling for nobody else but you. I'm flying high, but show me the ring and
So when doing watercolor, I've noticed that it's nice to kind of get a base down and then let it dry and then come back and go over with a few darker colors. So that's kind of what I did. I drew the green stems and leaves kind of lighter, and then I drew the lighter flowers. And then after this all kind of dried, I went back in with darker greens, added a few more leaves, and then I also went in with some darker pink as well on top of the flowers. And then you could easily leave it just like this, but I always kind of like the look you get when you go over watercolor with a black gel pen. It kind of just defines everything a little bit more, and it makes things kind of pop out. So yeah, that's really it for my cover page. It's a little busy, but I really like how it turned out. I was pretty happy with it. So on to the next page, which is going to be my monthly calendar and also some monthly goals and things like that. So I'm going to be setting up the calendar as I always do. It's going to be taking up most of the 2 pages because I did want it a little bit bigger this month than usual. So how I usually do this is I make my box where I want the whole calendar, and then I section it off 7 by 5. And since my bottom section was a lot bigger than the rest of it, I decided that I was going to split that off one more time, and then the bottom is where I was going to put my days of the week. So then I also made Sunday and Saturday a little darker since they're the weekends. Then I just added numbers to the calendar. I also drew a little box around each number as well. Then I'm just going to take my watercolor pen and I'm going to paint on a lighter pink in a few spots. And over these spots I'm going to write things, so these are kind of going to be like a little bit of a backdrop for that. Then I just also drew a few more of the little pink flowers into this layout as well. Plus, I noticed you almost need to draw the watercolor on first, and then that way it has a little bit of a time to dry while you're planning out everything else. So then once I was finished with the flowers, I took my black pen over them again and I just kind of outlined them a little bit. And then over the first pink spot in the corner, I just drew August out in cursive again. And then I thickened it just because it pops out a little bit more if you have it a little thicker. And then on the other spot, I put a spot for goals. This way I can have all my goals for the month, things that I kind of want to achieve. And then I put a to-do spot as well. That way I have a spot where I can write things that I actually need to get done. So then moving on to the next page, we're going to be doing a habit tracker. So I am just going to start off by putting the watercolor up in the corner where I'm going to write over. That way it gets a chance to dry while I'm drawing up everything else. And then I'm going to make all of my dots for the habit tracker. So for those of you guys who are new, I always make basically a bunch of rows of dots, and then I'll use them as kind of boxes for check marks. So when I do a habit, I check it off. And recently I started making lines instead of dots, because with dots you had to fill in each spot, whereas a line you can just draw it straight across, so it's a lot quicker to set up. Then on top of the dots I put out all of my numbers, so for all the days of the month I had 31 days for August, and then I just continued down with the lines. So then along the side I just write all of my habits, you know, like waking up earlier, maybe working out, things like that. So I often get questions from you guys like, what do you use a habit tracker for? So they say it takes 21 days to make something a habit. So things that I want to get in the habit of doing, I've just been keeping track of. And it also kind of serves as a checklist as well. So, you know, it's something I can check every day and go, what else didn't I do? Or, you know, what could I, you know, kind of fill in. And then as the month goes on, I'll just fill in each of the little spots. Then I'm just going to write habit tracker up on the watercolor paint, and also add some washi tape to kind of decorate it a little bit more. So then moving on to the next page, I'm actually going to fill this mostly with just a big logo and quote. So I used one of my pots to draw a circle, and then I just made this into a wreath. So I just drew all of the leaves around it, and I only did halfway because I've seen it before. It kind of looks cute if you don't fill it in all the way. And then I filled that in with one of my green gel pens. So then below this, I kind of think I'm going to put a spot for stats. So I've seen a lot of other YouTubers do this, where they put a spot, maybe they can track, you know, their views or their, you know, likes, things like that throughout the month. And I don't know, I thought it would be something interesting to try. We'll see if it ends up going into my next plan with me. If it ends up working out, then I'll include it. Otherwise, you know, it might not be for me. So I always like to try newer things in the bullet journals, even if you decide you don't like it. And now we're going to move on to the next page. So now we're just going to move on to the weekly spread. So this is more of what you guys can do every week. So I'm going to start out by laying down my watercolor paint first, so that way it gets a chance to dry while I'm doing all the other planning. And it looks a little wrinkly here on the page. This is because I got it a little too wet, but when it dries, it looks totally fine. You don't notice it. So then we're going to move on to making the squares for each day of the week. So I like to have these spots, that way I have a spot to put to-dos, goals, or events, anything that I need to do that day. So after I made my 7 boxes, I went down into the corner and I put 3 little spots. So one's for brain dump, where I can just kind of write my thoughts and everything that happened the week. And then a little to-do box. And then for the last box, I'm going to do an accomplishment spot. So, you know, it's nice to look back when you're going back through your bullet journal and think, what did I get done this week? Or, you know, it kind of motivates me a little bit too, so that's always helpful. So then I'm going to go to the other page, and I usually have a spot for the next week, so I can put all of my things that I need to do for the next week in case I don't have my bullet journal set up for the following week yet. And then I'm just going to let this watercolor paint dry. I'm going to move on and add a little bit more detail to the spread while I wait. So I've kind of been sticking with the pink flower theme all throughout the journal. So then in the corner next to the flower, I just wrote a little quote. And then I'm going back to where we started, and I'm going to add a little calendar in the top corner. So I like to have this so that I can kind of see where I am in the month, so that I know, you know, I'm in the first week, the second week, whatever. And then I'm going back and I'm adding August as well. And then I thought it needed a little something else, so I also added a little banner that said 2017. And then I went back, wrote next week on my little arrow. And then I'm going to be making 2 more boxes, and these are going to be for trackers. So the first one's going to be for water tracking, and the second one is going to be for workout tracking. So for water, I'm just going to make a line down the side, and then I'm going to separate this into 7 sections, one for each day of the week. Then I can just track how many ounces or how many bottles of water I had that day. So then for workout, I really haven't found a little setup that I liked yet, so I'm just going to leave this whole section blank, and then I'll just kind of write the date that I worked out and what I did a little bit. And then we'll be going back to the boxes for the weeks, and I'm going to put each day of the week and then also the date of that day. So like I said, I just like to have these to maybe put events, to-dos. I'll sometimes fill them with little checklists of things that I have to do that day, things like that. You could also put your trackers in these days. I used to do that, where I'd make little columns in these boxes and then I'd fill in water or workout or things like that. You could also track sleep too if you wanted. I used to do that as well. And then I'm just going to add a few more little pink accents, and then I'm finished. So that's it for my weekly spread, for my habit tracker, and for my monthly page, which just has my calendar and my goals and things like that, and then my cover page. So I hope you guys liked this month's bullet journal setup. If you did, then don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, and I will see you guys in my next video. Bye!